Hi, everybody. This is Tim Allen for the Flint Courier, and we are coming to you with another interview of one of our candidates. It's going to be on the primary ballot this year, and that is Jennifer Fielder. She is running for the Public Services Commission spot that oversees Granite County, among others. And so, Jennifer, welcome to our interview tonight.
Thanks, Tim. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, Jennifer, this is one of those positions. I know you've been in the Senate, but why don't you kind of tell people who you are and what you're doing here as far as public service.
Sure. Thanks. Well, it's my name's Jennifer, and the way my husband has taught people to remember the name, because it actually has been his name his whole life, and I've only had the name for about 21 years, but it's kind of like baseball: infielder, outfielder, right fielder, left fielder. I'm Senator Fielder, so that's one way how people can remember the name. But and he's a big baseball fan. In fact, if he had his way, we would name our property Fielder's Choice. So that's how big of a baseball fan he is.
Does he remember Cecil Fielder from the old Milwaukee Brewers?
But I live in Thompson Falls, Montana with my. Oh yeah, he's still got the headlines of Cecil Fielder when he was doing his thing and everything. I think he tried to tell people they were cousins at one point, but that story doesn't quite add up when you do a little fact checking.
Good enough.
But anyway, Paul and I live in a beautiful woodland setting in near Thompson Falls, Montana. It's very tranquil and quiet. We love it here, and it's a great little community. I ran for the state Senate 8 years ago when I saw my country basically disappearing before my eyes in terms of the things that I felt it represented to me, what being an American represented to me. And it seemed like it was kind of going off the rails in 2011 and 2012. And so we started to get involved a little bit in politics, and we ended up joining the Republican Party and trying to work against the re-election of President Obama back in 2012. That's when we got real concerned, and that's kind of why we got involved. But through that, we started paying more attention to what was going on overall, not only in our country, but in our own community and around us. And almost all the issues we were concerned about led back to politics. And we really weren't very political before that. But in fact, when I was going to run for office, I didn't really know which party I would want to be part of. So I read the platforms. I read the Democrat Party platform, and I read the Republican Party platform. And I was like, okay, God, Constitution, personal responsibility, and individual freedom. I like those things, and so those were a fit for me. So that's kind of what got me involved in the Republican Party and participating in that. And I ran as a Republican candidate for the Montana State Senate in 2012, and I was elected out of Northwest Montana, representing Sanders and Mineral County, and a little bit of Missoula County and Flathead County were included in that Senate district as well. And it's the first time I ever ran for anything, and it's the first time a woman has been elected out of this part of the state. So
wow, congratulations!
Two big bursts. And then so I did 4 years, and then I ran again for a second term and was successfully reelected. And now I'm at the end of my term limits for the state Senate. We can only do 8 years, and I was thinking I would go back to my own private life and go back to work and enjoy life again. And but this seat came open on the Public Service Commission, and several people asked me to stay involved in politics. They like the way I stand up for our rights and our freedoms, and for the the primary issues here in Northwest Montana. And I looked at the other people that were running, and I didn't feel comfortable with them representing me and representing this area. So I decided to file on the final day of the filing period on March 9th.
Well, so let's kind of look at, just real quick, can you give me kind of a summary of what the PSC does and why it's there?
Sure. So not too many people have heard of it, first of all, and not too many people pay attention to it. But the Public Service Commission in Montana has a really important role, and that is that it is supposed to regulate the large monopoly type companies, like those companies, privately owned electric, gas, and water companies that don't have any market competition, And the idea is that we don't want these companies to be able to take advantage of the customers, because the customers can't go shop for those services anywhere else. So that's one of the really big responsibilities of the Public Service Commission, is to make sure that these companies operate fairly and soundly, but they're not taking advantage of their monopoly status against customers. And it also has some other things that it does. It oversees the safety of railways and pipelines inside the state of Montana, and oversees some types of telecommunication, as well as some forms of commercial transportation. So a little bit of everything, not everything, but a little bit of a lot of things. But the main thing that they all have in common is that these companies are basically in a monopoly status, to where they could potentially take advantage of that status if there's not good guardians watching out for the public interest.
So that really, in a state like Montana, that is probably a fairly unique thing, I would think, because I know, in other states they'll have 2 or 3 cable companies you can choose from. Like even in Missoula, they have a couple free, but out here in Drummond, we only have really one, unless you want to go satellite. So yeah, obviously a lot of potential there and a lot of work.
Yeah, it's different state by state. Yeah, I served on one of the legislative committees that has oversight over some of the Public Service Commission functions. We call it PSC for short, but it is an amazing workload of documents to have to review. It's very legal, tons of legal proceedings and financial records that you have to look through, because when these companies come before the commission to ask for permission to raise the rates on customers, they have to demonstrate that it's actually justified, and that it's sound business models, and that they're not just price gouging the customers, but they actually need to do this in order to operate a viable company. So it's real important to be able to look at things objectively and think critically and study the information that's presented, and not be influenced by unwarranted influences, I should say. And there's a lot of pressure on some of these folks to just go along with what the big companies want to do. And I'm pretty well known for being a fierce independent when it comes to looking at things and standing up for the people, the individual families and constituents that I represent.
So we are now in a time, this self-isolation, and the reason we're doing our interview the way we are. What are some challenges that you can see for the Public Services Commission as they start to come out of this? I mean, do we think that some of these electric companies, water companies, are going to start asking hand over fist for increases, or what do you see on the horizon for this?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what's going to come of this, other than I think there's a workload that's being built up because people haven't been able to do the job this year as well as they normally would, as routine. They're not meeting as routinely as they would. All the staff are working from home, and they've tried to do the meetings over the electronic means, but they've run into some technology challenges there. I've tried to sit in on the hearings, and it's been obviously very awkward for them to conduct their meetings that way. But our economy is taking a serious hit with this coronavirus, and the government's response to the coronavirus really is causing some major problems. And it's going to take a while to dig out of it, and it's going to take some real hard work and some real good thinking to figure out how we're going to help families get out of this, and how we're going to help these companies survive, and how we're going to do it in a way that doesn't further cripple us down the road and create all kinds of unnecessary debt for our state and our nation as well. So huge challenges there in terms of going to work to restore our economy. And I don't know what all the answers are right now, but I'm sure going to be working hard on it. And my philosophy is I'm more of a free market person. I'm more of a limited government person. I believe people should help themselves while they can, and that government should get out of the way and allow them to prosper. So that's first and foremost, I think, what we need to be doing at this point. But we also need to take a real hard look at what government does in the future in terms of emergencies like this, so that we're not needlessly shutting down our economy. Now, I'm not saying that we needlessly shut it down in this case. I think when this first hit, nobody really knew what to expect. And so the precautions that were taken were understandable, but I think some things went way too far and have been able to go on for too long. And I think we need to be more surgical about how we handle emergencies like this in the future. And it's not just an emergency like coronavirus. I mean, with the Public Service Commission, we're talking about other emergencies that could come up just at the snap of a fingers too, like problems with a pipeline explosion, or a derailment of a train. There's emergency preparedness measures that need to be enacted, and I'm kind of a preparedness buff. I think that being prepared for the worst and hoping for the best is the best way that we should go about things. And so from a Public Service Commission standpoint, paying attention to those railway safety inspections and pipeline safety inspections and those functions that are really not talked about very much. Those are things I'm very interested in, because those are critical to protecting our communities.
So, one thing that I know that I and other people have run into here in the last few years is the issue of solar power and how it's administered in the state. And I know that I think, to my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Northwest Energy is a net metering company where if you give power to them, you get the same amount back before they start charging you for it, kind of thing. Do you see that as needing any kind of correction, or do you see any way that the PSC can help maybe make solar power more attractive? Because we seem to have a lot of opportunity for it here in Montana.
Yeah, the net metering thing is a really big issue that's been before the legislature a number of times, and there's a real division. There's a real polarization that's occurred around that activity, and what you have is you have the people that want to have their own power plants and sell the power back to the electric company, but they want to sell it for the same cost that the electric company sells it for. In other words, they want to make the electric company sell their power for free. I mean, without taking any kind of commission for their work in doing it or using their facilities. And then on the other side, you have the power company who has had a zero tolerance policy for net metering. It's just dead set against it. I actually carried a net metering bill in the legislature a couple sessions ago that would allow individual homeowners and small businesses to be able to have a second meter on their property, because right now under state law they can have just one meter on their property. But say there's a rancher that has a electric source out by the barn or at some well out on his ranch land that's not necessarily at the home or at the main power plant. Maybe he's got a windmill, maybe he's got solar, but he's to be able to power his barn or a well or something with another remote power source and put in another windmill or another solar panel. And he's not right now, he's not allowed to connect that to the other meter that's on his property. He would have to have separate meters, and they wouldn't both be allowed to be connected to sell the extra power back to the power company. So I actually worked on trying to get that through, so that, I believe in energy independence. I believe that individuals and small businesses should have these opportunities to have their own generation plants if they want them, but I don't believe they should make the power company sell it for the same price that the power company is selling their other power retail. I think that there needs to be some middle ground in there where folks that want to use the power company to resell the product would basically provide it at more of a wholesale cost, and the power company could then resell it at a retail cost or somewhere in between. But there needs to be some kind of an agreement there. And the problem is that neither end has been willing to budge on that. And I'd like to find a solution to that. I think it's an important issue that we should be able to arrive at some kind of an agreement on.
I mean, to put it maybe in a sense that other people might understand, it would be like asking somebody to sell something on consignment and not expect the consignment shop to take anything for it. I mean, that's exactly right.
That's exactly right. That's a great analogy. And that's just, that's wrong. I don't believe the government should force somebody to provide a service to someone else at no charge,
Yeah.
So, but the power companies are using public resources, so they do have a public nexus. I mean, if you think about it, the dams, the hydroelectric projects are on our waterways of Montana, and the power lines are on our public right-of-ways, and that type of thing. So there is a nexus between these power companies and a public interest, because they are using public resources to be able to provide. So there's a little bit of that, but they're the ones that invested the money, and the ratepayers and the shareholders, they're the ones that are paying for those facilities. So we shouldn't let someone else just jump on for a free ride. They should pay their fair share too. if they want to use that system, that network.
So, you know, in looking at the area that you're going to cover, your district is number 4, correct? And that you're looking to get
Yes.
in. Lincoln, Sanders, Mineral, Missoula, Ravalli, Granite, and Powell. Now,
Right.
arguably, of those 7 counties, Granite, population-wise, may be the smallest, if not one of the smallest in there.
Yeah.
How do you balance those needs across I hate to say metropolitan, but a larger city like Missoula versus something like Drummond or Phillipsburg that just doesn't have the same capacity? How do you look at doing that in the PSC?
Well, first of all, Mineral County is in my Senate district, and it's a very low populated county too, so it's fairly similar to Granite. In fact, are 2 of the only counties over here in the West, along with Granite and Powell, that don't have the COVID in them. So we've got those kind of things in common. I think social distancing for us is kind of a way of life, but when you get to the urban center of downtown Missoula, that's a different ball game in terms of what makes that culture tick and what's important to people there. But the way that I go about things is based on principles. It's not really about getting caught in between of what this group wants and what that group wants. I look at what are the correct principles. And the principles that this country were founded on are darn good principles. And so those basic constitutional framework that our founders set up, life and liberty and property and the ability for people to pursue their dreams. Those are kind of the core of what drives my thinking. And I think that those are really good principles. It really should. Some people try to make them political, but when you apply correct principles to the different situations, it's pretty easy to come out with, consistency in the direction that you're going. People that don't believe in or adhere to those principles, I feel real sorry for them in politics, because I see how they struggle with not knowing what to do, they don't know what the right thing to do is, and they get influenced and they kind of bounce around kind of any which way the wind blows. And I feel real sorry for people that don't have that moral compass or that grounding in God and our Constitution, because those 2 things really drive my decision-making process.
So I guess as we kind of close this here, what if you could leave voters with one nugget, one thing in asking for their vote, what would be that you'd tell them?
Well, I'm definitely the candidate that's prepared to do this job well and committed to doing it well. I'm not running for this for a title or a paycheck. I think that the Public Service Commission is a very important job that needs to be done by somebody who will actually give it the attention that it deserves and needs, and watch out for the interests of the people and find that balance so that these companies that are providing the services can provide them in a way that's sound, but can't take advantage of their position in having that monopoly status over the people. So I'm that candidate. I think I'm not the one that's going to go along with everything the companies want to do, and I'm not the one that's going to try to regulate the companies to death. I'm going to find that balance point that works.
All right. Well, Jennifer, we wish you the best of luck in the upcoming election. I really enjoyed talking with you this afternoon. And
thank you.
If we can be of service to you down the road, if you get through this, we'll talk again. So thank you very much for your time today.
Well, thank you. I'm looking forward to getting over to Granite County. In fact, I'm headed that way tomorrow. I'm going to spend some time there this weekend, and hopefully in the weeks ahead, I can meet more folks that way. So thanks a lot, Tim. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Jennifer. So Jennifer Fielder, again, candidate for the Public Service Commission District 4 that oversees our county, Granite County, and 6 others. And she will be on your primary ballot when it hits your mailbox starting on May 8th. So,
Tim?
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be, I'm going to be on the primary ballot because people are going to receive 3 ballots in the mail this time. So they need to really watch for that. So I'm on I looked at the ones that the county put out there, it was kind of confusing because I wasn't on the first ballot and I about had a heart attack. And then I realized, oh, that's the Democrat one. So then I looked at the next one and I wasn't there either. I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened? They left me off. And then I found the third one, and that was the Republican one. So look for that Republican Party ballot, and that's where my name will be under the Public Service Commission race.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Before we close, just remember, everybody, when you get those ballots, we have the sample ballot on our website. You can see that on one of our stories. We have it on our Facebook page. But there's 3 ballots. You can only fill out one of them. So you got to pick out one of them and say, that's the party I'm going with. And I think from what we've talked about today, I think looking at the Republican ballot and picking Jennifer might be a pretty good choice. So thanks a lot for your time.
Thanks a lot, Tim. I appreciate that.
All right, that'll do it. So remember to look for your ballots coming out May 8th, and we will check in with you with more candidate interviews. For the FlintCreekCourier.com, this has been Tim Allen.